Hi there, I'm John Lemley. Welcome to Momentum, a service of the City of Peachtree Corners. Social media and government. More and more governments, whether the federal government all the way down to the local level, are choosing to connect with those they serve through social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. The list goes on and on. They're finding that they can catch the eyes and ears of the people that need to know what's going on around them through social media. Social media and government, I guess you could say, a marriage of sorts these days. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and maybe touch on the ugly as well with those who know full well exactly how this can and possibly can't work. Kelly Bennett is a media specialist recognized for her editorial social media marketing and brand storytelling abilities. She's the Communications and Marketing Associate for the Georgia Municipal Association. Also with us, the big man on campus, if you will, the city manager of Peachtree Corners, Brian Johnson. He comes with a distinguished military career, including serving as officer in charge of civil military operation in the Baghdad suburb of Sadr City. He successfully planned and organized the formation of a municipal government there, which I'm sure came with its own list, a long list probably, of challenges. Judy Putnam is Communications Director for the City of Peachtree Corners. She has over 2 decades of experience with editing, marketing, writing, and most importantly, social media as well in her background. Alex Wright is District 3 Councilman for Peachtree Corners. He also comes with a military background. Alex became a vocal advocate for the City of Peachtree Corners in 2011 when he began writing a blog for a community newspaper. Also with us, 2 of my Momentum colleagues, Lisa Word and Bruce Peoples. A big thank you to everyone for being with us today. It's going to be an interesting conversation. It would be great if we could begin with a look at how social media and government work on different levels.
Should government, use social media as a means of communicating with their citizens?
Absolutely. I think social media is a great way for the government as a whole to reach citizens. And one of those reasons is people are navigating away from even ever looking at email. And you can look at the statistics of open rates just over the past 10 and 20 years, and they've just plummeted. And with any company or government organization, if you want to engage people, you need to go to where they are. The newspaper is not something as many people are reading these days as compared to social media, your Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and those kind of things.
I would like to begin with Kelly, if we could, talking about how you work day to day on a statewide level when it comes to social media.
Awesome. So I run the Georgia Municipal Association, GMAs, our Facebook and our Twitter accounts. So day to day, I go and look and see what news is happening in cities that we want to share. Our big thing is the love for cities and really putting cities out there as the best place to live, work, and play, especially in Georgia. So finding those stories that will highlight cities, the good going on in cities, as well as any types of trainings or events we have going on, pushing those out there to our membership. During the legislative session, I use Twitter primarily as a way to touch legislators and really introduce topics to them through our constituents. So it really kind of changes throughout the year.
So your job is communicating with lawmakers and decision makers.
Right. For the first part of the year, of course, they look at our content throughout the year, but also just people that love Georgia, people that love Georgia cities and love seeing what's going on, whether it be a fair and festival.
Brian, even before becoming city manager of the City of Peachtree Corners, is there an example of how you used social media to communicate not only with your constituency, but also with leaders, decision makers?
Oh, certainly. I mean, these are powerful tools that, I've employed throughout my career, especially as a city manager. Some of the less common ways that social media is used, and maybe less controversial is in what's kind of timely now with us having a hurricane hit the East Coast, is in the emergency management environment. I've used that quite a bit because, that's one where there's really not a lot of back and forth discourse that's controversial. It's about public safety, getting potentially life-saving information out to people who need to know it. The thing about social media, as diverse as it is, which is sometimes complicated, but if you use it, you can pretty much get in some way, shape, or form somebody using one of those platforms. So you throw a wide net by using all of it, and that's the best way oftentimes to get critical information like emergency management stuff out to the widest audience. So that's one of the main ways, more positive ways that I've been able to use it as a city manager.
So essentially, you're getting information into the hands of those you serve.
And again, doing so, sometimes you have to go to them. Some people are very exclusive. Maybe they just like Instagram and they get most of it there, or Twitter, or Facebook, or print media, or television, or radio. And you got the whole generational issue here too. Some people have, are of an age that they've never gotten into social media and they like the more conventional. Others have never gotten into print. And so if we really as a city want to get it to the widest audience, and you really need to do that when it's, again, life safety is at stake, you got to go where the people are at, whether you like it or not.
So it's important to build that relationship ahead of the emergencies so that the connection is already there.
Got to have that presence to be able to use it.
Judy, I'm sure since you first began working in public relations that you have seen quite an evolution when it comes to writing and editing, communicating with people.
Absolutely, yes. It's been remarkable, and certainly the social media is what has really changed that. The good news is that it reaches more people.
And I'm sure for someone that comes from a professional writing standpoint, being limited by, say, a couple of hundred characters, such as with Twitter, can be quite a challenge.
It's good, because it teaches you new skills and teaches you to write tighter.
Brevity.
Everybody is bombarded by so much. Sometimes I think less, shorter, concise message is more effective.
Alex, I would love to hear more about your blog and how that led you to city government, specifically now as a councilman who uses social media as a form of communication.
I just kind of fell into it, really. There was a city movement here to create a city, because we're a new city, and I'd sent a letter in to someone advocating for it. This was on a different website, and one day I get a phone call from Miss Putnam, and she said, "Hey," and said, "we'd love to have you start writing articles pro-city." And so I started doing that, advocating for the city, and then people voted to create a city. And then in the aftermath of that, had some people approached me and say, "Would you be interested in running for the council?" When you're campaigning or you're advocating for something, that's very different than once you become elected. You hear people talk about there's campaigning and then there's governing. Because when you're governing, you're representing all the people. You're not there to, at least in my opinion, push a narrow agenda right? And so Judy already does a great job of sharing information across all of these, Twitter, Facebook, whatnot. And so I'm not trying to duplicate that, but I have like a newsletter I send out once a month, and it's very, a lot of details to it. It's very intentional about what I want to write about, but I believe it's very important to share information with the people. There's a high degree of distrust right now with government. And I think the more information you can share to be as transparent as possible, that actually increases the level of trust. Because if you've got something to hide, you're not going to be sharing all the information. And one of the things actually is kind of ironic is the more information I share, the less questions I get.
Lisa and Bruce, I would love to hear from you about your interaction with different people from the community and their viewpoints, their opinions on this intersection of social media and government.
Sure, I'll start first. I think what I'm hearing and what I heard talking to some of the citizens is that a city today has to have a social media strategy. You know, you used to have a PR strategy, but now social media has almost eclipsed that. And it sounds like the city of Peachtree Quarters has given it a lot of thought. But you really kind of have to manage it all the time. It's like a full-time job, basically, you know, communicating with your citizens and keeping them up to date.
One of the things that I learned, from some of the people that we interviewed previously was that, we have to really think long and hard about this because this is a digital footprint. And this digital footprint is going to be out there long past, any of us, you or I, and it's going to impact not only the city, but it also impacts you as a person. It impacts you, your personal brand. It impacts the city's brand. And that I think the majority of people that we've spoken to agree that social media is something that's here. It is the way to go. It's cost efficient. It's an opportunity for us to get to people we otherwise might not get to. However, there really is, some thought around the fact that we need to be more accountable for how we're using it and what the long-term implications of it are. There's so many channels with regards to social media, and when you think about things in the context of government and officials and politicians and all that sort of thing, are there any particular channels that you think are better or are not so good for them to be able to communicate?
I think the best one that we have locally is Nextdoor, because one of the things about that makes it great is that you have to actually certify that you live in the neighborhood to have access to Nextdoor. So you're always engaging in conversation with your neighbors and not sort of outside trolls or people who are trying to sway your opinion who don't live in your neighborhood. And I know people that use it for anything from trying to sell things and sort of like as a mini Craigslist to using it as an avenue to sort of question the officials, but also to sort of bring up and get other people's feedback. And it's always good to see what other people think. And I think Nextdoor's a great platform for that because you can have those threaded conversations. Unlike something like a Twitter where you can sort of tweet something out, but it's sort of hard to follow an actual dialogue in Twitter.
When it comes to social media, there are many platforms out there, as we've already pointed out, and I'm sure that some are better at disseminating information from a government and institution than are others.
I work really closely with the Georgia Government Communicators Group. So that's a really tight-knit group of public information officers, social media managers from across the state. And one platform they're finding the most success in is Facebook, just because there's such a high user rate there. And they're able to do more long-form stories, more long-form posts. They're able to post events, and it's just a lot more reach on there. But I have seen others really venture out into the Instagrams and sometimes even the Snapchat. Instagrams are really there to help kind of boost tourism in those visually appealing aspects of the city.
And Facebook, specifically, as I understand it, now has an older audience, and maybe those people are more apt to be interested in their local government.
While the audience is getting older, their algorithm is changing. So what that means is that Facebook is really calling on a lot more genuine connections. So what we're finding is some of the posts we even do from the Georgia Municipal Association, we want to link back to the website. Those aren't getting as much traction as the conversations that we stay and nurture actually on the Facebook platform. So it's ever changing, but we do see kind of that the older generation who, once they kind of get the flow of Facebook, they're a little more comfortable than the rapidly ever-evolving Twitter timeline.
I do know that, and Judy can speak to this a little bit better, but we've got kind of two types of information. When it comes to the official stuff that is important, that it's accurate and it doesn't get, we really try to pull people to a platform that you can assume is accurate and unencumbered with all this, and that is our website. So that tends to be the focal point we pull. So Judy will reach out through a lot of these social media sites and platforms that are out there, encouraging oftentimes people to come back to our website. Because when you go to the website, we want you to enter that portal and feel like, okay, this is official, this is accurate, this is the city speaking on behalf of a large group. And then on the community quality of life stuff, she kind of uses her discretion as a professional in this to decide, and you can tell them where you...
Okay. Facebook is, like Kelly said, is probably our go to. It is the larger of the audience, and it gets, seems to be the most useful in getting the information out. We always encourage them to go, if they said, well, I've got a street light out, how can I report that? That's my opportunity to pull them into the city's website, because that's where the official information is that they need to go to.
And you do have to, she's had to respond like on Nextdoor to say, Nextdoor is not where you tell the city that there's a street light out, because it happens, but that's what she's got to do, is monitor all that and say, no, don't go, come to the website. That's where it's all there. So that's our challenge.
And I have to applaud you, Judy, for doing that, because it's all about maintaining expectation. Because once you start answering and, logging those requests from social media, and you're not taking them back to the formal communication of your website, then that's where the waters can get muddy, and that's where fingers can get pointed. So I think one thing that we have to really differentiate is formal and informal communication.
One of the things too that, when you think about all this usage of social media, and, to everyone's point here, as far, it's really about finding that balance. And then, as you mentioned about, you could have hundreds of different cities and they'd have different opinions. That all comes back to your demographic. Your demographic is constantly changing. So what your demographic is today is certainly not what it was 5 years ago, and it's not what it's going to be next year either. So you've got to have people in place that work along with your social media teams to continuously monitor your demographics, to kind of know what's changing and also what you want to change, what you want to see. This particular city is very technology oriented, so they want to be able to get people that are in the area to understand, hey, we're here, we're tech savvy, we know that you're tech savvy, so we have to be able to kind of move and shift and change. So there's no one size fits all for each city. But as far as, your official communications, certainly you have to have that place. You have to bring things in. And we're in an area where one of our people that we interviewed spoke about, you and I, each one of us, if we do a podcast, if we do a blog, we're all newscasters now. And we suddenly become experts on everything. And then when that happens, it does kind of gray the area. It kind of skews things. And then people become ontologically arrogant, wherein they believe that their reality is everyone else's reality. And that's just not so. So to be able to have these specific targeted places where the city does have their official information, says this is who we are, this is what we stand by. You'll be able to find the same information today that you found yesterday, and you'll find that same information tomorrow, to be able to bring people back into more of a formal structured living. And without structure, we are a lost community everywhere we go.
Well, what happens if, say, an elected politician utilizes a city or a state or a government entity website or social media site to kind of say something controversial? Any thoughts about that, or what the implications might be to that?
Well, you'd have to define controversial. Something that's going to have a controversy with just about anything that's put out there.
Sure.
I think you want to be kind of neutral about things. I don't think you want to intentionally put things out there that are going to inflame people. I think that's probably more appropriate to deal with in a one-on-one, face-to-face, personal meeting type of situation.
Yeah. On the flip side, sometimes people post on social media when they get angry or something happens. Say a police officer pulls them over and gives them a ticket that they thought they didn't deserve. Any thoughts on that? How a city might respond to that when a citizen starts saying some very negative things out there on social media?
Well, I don't think the city or the government should respond on the social media. I don't think that that's their place. It's not a place, it's a place to distribute information. It's not a place to get into big disputes. It's easy to say whatever you feel, whenever you feel it on social media.
Right.
You wouldn't necessarily say the same thing or do the same thing if you were interacting with someone face to face.
That's true. That's true. It's a little harder to be that negative when you're looking at somebody, right?
Yes.
Is it a difficult balancing act through social media to present this smiling, happy face and at the same time preserve the respect for the individual office or the agency that you're representing?
Not to delve into politics, but I think there's current examples of where social media can be used by the government to push agendas. And the problem with that is everyone's not going to, it can antagonize people. It can inflame passions unnecessarily. I don't really think that's the role of the city or the council, in our case, for that matter. It's really sharing information with people, telling them about things that are going on. And some of those events might have a political nature to them. We're going to have a town hall tonight to discuss, X, Y, and Z, or this council person is going to have, a meeting to hear people's opinions about X, Y, and Z. I think that's an appropriate use of the city's resources to gather the people there and they can discuss that. But when you have the city or someone representing the city misusing social media, I think it can have it's almost the opposite of what I was talking about before, where there's a lot of distrust of government. How do you help fix that, right? By sharing information. And you can totally destroy that like that with antagonizing tweets. When I was in the Navy, they had a, joke about for every, 1,000 attaboys, one screw up, and it wipes all that away. And it's kind of the same idea where you're building that trust of the people. And then if you get one of your council members or any politician get on and say something purposely to antagonize people, it's just very destructive.
Hey, John, where it can get really ugly, I think, on Facebook is when people kind of hide behind the cloak of anonymity, if I pronounce that correctly. And one of the folks I interviewed was the lack of face-to-face interaction. It's really easy to take pot shots at city government or elected officials when you're not sitting there in front of them.
Keyboard courage.
Keyboard courage, there you go. And so that's sort of one of the downsides of the whole thing.
Here's an interesting anecdotal point to that comment you just made. So Judy and I have found success in somebody reaching out, oftentimes through social media, in a very critical way. Not reaching out for dialogue, but making critical observations and whatever about the city. You guys didn't do this right, so on and so forth. And again, her monitoring the best she can these platforms, when it comes to her attention, she will reach out and invite that individual to come in and say, you know what, we would love to have a face-to-face conversation with you about that. Not saying that their point is bad or good, but just come in. 85% of the time, we never hear from them.
Of course, yeah.
Well, there you go.
And the 15% of the time, I would like to think that 14.5% of it, they leave and they're like, you know what, they're not as crappy as I thought that they were, type of thing. But we have had some saying, I beg to differ on certain things, but I appreciate access to information or whatever. But that's just some interesting point that it's real easy to be sitting, the anonymity of sitting at your house, and you don't have to face them or even voice. I mean, she'll start with face-to-face, or if they're like, oh, I can, it's really hard. When City Hall's open, city manager would love for you to call him. And 85% of the time, no thanks, never mind, or, well, it's no good anyway, but so there's that part that we have to fight too, is just that.
That's a great thing, because I think what I see a lot is that people act off of impulsivity so much, and they don't think about where they are in the moment. Yeah. And maybe my cable bill was overdue. I lost my job. My dog ran out in the street, and all of a sudden I see something where you have an opinion about a pothole and I don't like it. And it has nothing to do with the pothole as much as it has to do with the person themselves at that moment. And that happens so much. And, I had opportunity some years ago to be an editor for an online publication. And I remember posting my first article and getting all these people saying these horrible things. And I had to really step back and say, okay, you're not where they were in that moment. So you can't take that personal. And I think that what we're finding sometimes, unfortunately now, with some of the things, as you mentioned, with the tweets that come out, let's speak to the elephant in the room, is that people are speaking from where they are at that moment. Mm-hmm. If people feel attacked, then they attack you back. Hurting people hurt people, and that's what people are doing. But the impulse control is an issue. We have some really fast-moving social media platforms, and when they're fast-moving and you're fast-moving and you're impulsive and you say and do things that are counter to what you're really trying to get across in the first place.
Or you misread. I mean, Councilman Wright's talked to me as we've talked strategy, is you could get a response and you read that response, talked about it to be something that may not have been the way that, you're...
I always encourage council members, read it, walk away, and then come back to it. I think council members and government communicators, it's just like, ask yourself, do I have to respond now? One thing I tell all of my cities to do is come up with a policy that lives on social media that says, these are the types of comments that are allowed. these are what aren't allowed, because we're getting into kind of the First Amendment space where if you block somebody, that could be in violation of their First Amendment rights. But if you've clearly outlined in this policy, oh, we already told you defamatory comments, sorry, they will not be allowed, then you kind of, that creates a bubble, a
can
safety
delete
net
them.
around you. So I see a lot of cities, and I have some templates I can share with you all that have already created these policies that live on their social media pages and also on their website. So they can always go back and say, why is my comment not up there? Well, in accordance to our social media policy, you didn't do the right thing.
There are so many outlets on social media. If a government official or a politician or a candidate that's running for election is attacked by somebody on social media, defamed or maligned some kind of way,
Right.
what should they do? How should they handle that? And what's your experience in seeing any of that?
Interesting. There's some places you just need to leave alone and not go. Now, if someone's out there and they're doing bad talk and they're incorrect facts, and it's on Twitter or Facebook, some better known places, and it's going to be shared, I think the better way of doing it is to come out and to provide the correct facts, but not to attack whoever's doing it. So if you're going to answer someone's falsehoods on social media, or if you're going to respond to issues, maybe it's not falsehoods, it's just a difference of opinion, it's okay to do that on social media. You just don't want it to get out of control.
What do you mean? And what do you mean by out of control?
So you don't want to keep responding. You could tit for tat on that. You could go back and forth, and if it's not a productive thing, at some point you just have to let it go.
It seems that if someone is unhappy with something going on in government, that's when you're going to hear from them. So when it comes to an official or the agency you're representing being attacked, what do you do? How do you handle that?
Right. So great question. So we really leave it up to the discretion of the cities. But one thing we always tell our elected officials in our cities is to remain consistent. So if you're going to respond, make sure you're responding and keeping that consistent. It requires a lot of bandwidth to go back and forth with someone. I know elected officials, they have a lot more freedom, for lack of a better term, to kind of input their own ideas and opinions. So that's something that they want. If they want to respond on their own, I think, that's up to them. But as far as cities, I have some cities at the completely different ends of the spectrum. Some will just let comments sit. Some will go back and forth and answer questions and go to a website. But it's really up to the cities. But one thing I think is really important to remember is that as elected officials, we are role models. As cities, we are role models. This is where people want to live, work, and play. That's why residents are here and visitors are coming for the most part. So it's really difficult to answer should all cities respond, because it's really up to city leaders, city managers, and then how elected officials want to respond, keeping in mind that they are elected to do a job and to serve constituents.
So, Alex, here in Peachtree Corners, how do you handle a situation like that?
Me personally, you're correct where you get more critical email than you do, hey, you're doing a great job. I think some of that's just human nature. We're all probably guilty of that to a certain extent. But when I get someone that emails me, there's something unhappy about, I think in most cases, they really just want to feel like they're being heard. And I'll always respond, maybe with questions, trying to clarify what they're trying to get at, to take the emotion out of it. Because if you respond emotionally, then it's not going to go to a good place. And so I normally will respond with just informational type questions. Sometimes, I'll say, hey, do you want to get together and talk? Do you want to, talk on the phone? That often will either A, give them an opportunity to get whatever's off their chest to you directly. And people often will act differently in person or on the phone than they will as they type, right? Or in some cases, they don't want to engage. And I think in those cases, what you've found is they were just looking to vent. But when you respond, I think the key thing is not to respond, not engage them emotionally.
To what Kelly said about being a role model, let's face it, think about the celebrities that are out there. These people didn't choose to be role models, they're chosen right? They're chosen by the public. And it's the same thing that when you get into these positions in city government, you know, and you're a politician, you know, we see a lot of people, I'm going to speak to that elephant in the room. There's a certain person that tweets a whole lot about a lot of stuff and it inflames a lot of people. And it has a lot of influence for people because people look to that person as though he's a role model, right? That he's their role model, whatever that role may be.
On the topic of moving forward in the months and years to come when it comes to government and social media, what is, in your opinion, the next big thing?
I'm definitely seeing a surge in video. Facebook is, obviously we're here for a reason, you know, recording this video, but Facebook, like, their algorithm is changing to where video is more personal. Snippets, GMA just invested in a drone to go and cover kind of infrastructure projects going on across the state. So people, we've kind of passed the scanner society of reading really quickly. Let me just click and get some audio. So video is definitely booming right now.
So essentially adding texture to your post.
What I tell my elected officials all the time, it's a conversation. So if people can see you out at, like, as much as you want to share, see you out at games, or, you know, you still kind of maintain that role model identity when you're out and on social media, they may be a little more slow to bash you because they kind of feel that connection and they see, oh, this is actually a person that's wanting to serve me as a resident.
Without offering any spoilers, are there any new things on the horizon when it comes to Peachtree Corners and social media?
Well, really, I actually think that it was just hit on. I think we've recognized that the texture, video, kind of almost like you've got to have a really good hook up front to get somebody to want to spend their precious time. And when I say precious, time hasn't necessarily gotten any more precious throughout, you know, the course of history, with the exception of now. If I only have X amount of time that I'm going to be reading and you know, watching things on this stuff, but there's billions of options now, and there used to be, you know, one or two newspaper or book, and now, I can go just, it's almost infinite. And so if I'm going to hook that person to stop on mine more than doing this, we've got to increase.
Yeah. So there's a certain entertainment aspect to it, and that's kind of the balance where you've got, someone was talking earlier about, you know, someone that was elected who was almost an entertainment aspect to it with the tweets, right? How do you balance providing a certain level of entertainment to engage people, but yet not do it in a divisive way? The younger generations, more and more of it is eyeballs versus, you know, watching something versus reading, and you kind of have to go there.
You do.
I find myself watching more video than, I love to read, but it's more entertaining, you know, the 2 or 3
It's
minute
like with
video.
anything else, you've got to have your shtick, for lack of a better term, right? You've got to have that thing that makes me stop on your post, your tweet, your photo, or whatever it is. I need to stop there and not stop over here, because I'm probably not going to stop. And people are spending more and more time. If you look at some of the data that's out there with regards to how much time they're spending on social media, you get up in the morning, what's the first thing people are doing? They're picking up their phone and they're checking it out. Next thing you know, you're late for work. You've got that narrow window, and you literally have seconds to be able to gain their attention. Because the other thing too is that what I'm finding from my perspective is that our attention spans are shortening. So because those attention spans are shortening, you've got to find your shtick that's going to make that person in that half of a second grab whatever you have to say.
You are right. I also notice I'm probably been going on a long time, but, you know, video content, like say on a Facebook feed, you know, has been there for a while, but I'm noticing the video now, they all close caption it, almost like we know that they're in a meeting and they're like this, you know, under the table, but they're interested in the video, but they want the audio too, but they can't, you know, so it's just
getting more sophisticated.
Yeah,
you can shoot a whole movie on an iPhone, you know. And the quality of the production is going up too.
Well, you've got psychologists that are behind a lot of this too. These people are employing psychologists when they're thinking about, you know, you look at the whole Facebook thing, when they talked about, we made this so that it could be addictive, and how could they do that? You know, you've got to talk to psychologists and psychiatrists to find out what is it that makes the human brain tick, and it's going to bring that person over to that thing. So organizations also need to think about, those options too. Are you consulting with people who deal with brain science to know how to get people in and get them engaged to what you're putting out there?
One thing we haven't talked about, especially as you're talking about officials associated with a public, entity like a city, whether it's an elected public official or appointed, as popular as these things are, and they are popular, we all use them, but they have such a almost a scary ability to galvanize and fire a group up whip up into a frenzy. And as a public official, the standard, the threshold for libel and those kind of things is much higher because we are in the public sphere. We're doing things, and these platforms, unfortunately, do provide a very easy way for people's personal integrity and character, and even families, to get pulled into this, and it can get whipped up into a frenzy. It takes a lot of discipline, given the power. Social media, especially when you're when you're a public official.
Lots of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
As we wrap up this interesting conversation, I want to begin first by thanking members of the community who came in to talk with us about this intersection of social media and government, but also our panel here today, the state of Georgia, also representatives from the city of Peachtree Corners, and of course my Momentum colleagues as well. Thank you for spending some time with us today. It's not complete, the conversation that is, until we hear from you, so get in touch with us by way of social media. Until next time, I'm John Lemley, and this is Momentum.